Before we dive into this incredible story, make sure to hit that subscribe button so you never miss another jaw-dropping revelation from Hollywood news. Some people live entire lives untouched by the need for money, navigating the world with a sense of purpose that transcends material wealth. Frank Fritz was one of those rare souls, but what he left behind was something no one could have imagined. When Frank was found lifeless in his Iowa home, it wasn't just the shock of his passing that made headlines. It was what was hidden behind the unassuming garage door that truly stunned the world. Inside, investigators uncovered over 75 vintage motorcycles, many in pristine condition, including a one-of-a-kind 1947 Indian Chief prototype valued at more than $250,000. That alone would have been enough to stir the collector world. But the surprises didn't stop there. Among the dust and grease sat Aerosmith's long-lost tour bus and, unbelievably, a prototype Yoda figure from Star Wars, a piece even George Lucas himself thought had been lost forever. But perhaps the most haunting discovery wasn't mechanical or cinematic. It was personal. Dozens of handwritten journals were found stacked neatly in a corner, each chronicling the painful decline of Frank's final years. The entries were raw, emotional, and brutally honest, offering a glimpse into the struggles he kept hidden from the public eye. These weren't just notes. They were a record of a man wrestling with fading fame, deteriorating health, and fractured relationships. Frank's journey began in Davenport, Iowa, back in 1963. Even as a child, he stood apart. While others collected trading cards or built model airplanes, Frank gathered rocks, beer cans, stamps, and even paper clips. His room looked more like a museum than a bedroom. His parents found it quirky, but for Frank, every item had meaning. A memory attached, a story worth preserving. At school, Frank was more interested in antique stores and flea markets than textbooks. He met Mike Wolfe in 8th grade, and the two bonded over their shared obsession with lost treasures. Weekends turned into treasure hunts, old barns, garage sales, flea markets. Nothing was off limits. While others saw junk, Frank saw potential. He had what collectors called the eye. Frank never felt drawn to college. Instead, he took a job as a fire inspector, a position he held for 25 years. Even in that role, he couldn't resist the allure of forgotten artifacts. Old buildings often yielded unexpected treasures. Fire helmets, antique alarm bells, and tools long past their prime. His inspections became something more than routine safety checks. They were scavenger hunts in disguise. By the time he turned 16, Frank had bought his first vintage motorcycle, a 1964 Harley-Davidson, paying more than $4,000 for it, a huge sum for a teenager. But Frank wasn't like other kids. He worked tirelessly at local hardware stores to fund his obsession, and that obsession grew. Over time, he amassed over 100 vintage bikes and even built a barn to house them. He wasn't just a collector, he was a preserver of history. Frank was a fixture at the Sturgis Motorcycle Rally in South Dakota, where enthusiasts began to recognize the burly, bearded man with the uncanny ability to spot hidden gems. He wasn't chasing fame. He was chasing stories, fragments of the past, given new life through restoration. His attention to detail, honed during his fire inspection days, gave him an edge. He could walk into a cluttered attic or warehouse and within minutes spot something of immense value hidden beneath layers of dust. This sixth sense, combined with his vast knowledge, would soon land him on national television. In 2002, Frank left his fire inspector job and opened Frank's Finds in Savannah, Illinois. Housed in an old opera house, the store was more than a business. It was a time capsule. Filled with relics from a bygone era, it attracted collectors, history buffs, and the curious alike. The dim lighting and musty scent didn't deter visitors. To many, it felt like stepping back in time. Then came the call that would change everything. His longtime friend Mike Wolfe had been filming his picking adventures, hoping to turn them into a TV show. He asked Frank to join. At first, Frank was hesitant. He loved his shop. It was his sanctuary. But one incredible deal changed his mind. He bought a fraternity pin for $115 and sold it for $450. That moment ignited something inside him, a thrill he hadn't felt in years. He locked up the shop and hit the road with Mike. Their chemistry was instant. Frank's laid-back, methodical approach perfectly complemented Mike's high-energy hustle. When American Pickers premiered in 2010, it was an instant hit. The first episode pulled in over 3 million viewers. Audiences connected with Frank's authenticity. He didn't play a character, he was simply himself, a man with a passion for uncovering hidden treasures and telling their stories. He became a household name. Fans waited in long lines for autographs. Museums invited him for special appearances. One of the show's episodes drew a staggering 5.3 million viewers. The white truck, the roadside dives, the impromptu deals, it all became part of a weekly ritual for millions. Frank remained true to his roots. He still hunted for motorcycle memorabilia, oil cans, and quirky toys. He still got excited over a well-worn sign or an old fire helmet. What made him special wasn't the items he picked. It was how he made you care about them. He shared their stories, their origins, the hands they had passed through. Every object was a thread in a much larger tapestry, and he shared his knowledge too. In 2013, Frank published How to Pick Vintage Motorcycles, a guide filled with insights, anecdotes, and practical tips for collectors. His writing mirrored his TV persona, humorous, down-to-earth, and full of heart. It wasn't about the money, it was about the joy of discovery, the thrill of bringing something forgotten back to life. But beneath the success, Frank battled demons. He lived with Crohn's disease for more than 3 decades, a painful condition that made daily life an uphill climb. He rarely spoke about it, preferring to keep his suffering private. On screen, he was always smiling. Off screen, he was often in agony. In 2017, his personal struggles became public after a DUI arrest. He admitted to using Xanax and alcohol to cope with anxiety. The constant scrutiny, the pressure of fame, it wore him down. Though he avoided jail, the incident tarnished his reputation and marked the beginning of a downward spiral. Frank's relationship with Mike Wolfe also began to deteriorate. By 2021, they hadn't spoken in 2 years. Frank felt sidelined by the show's producers. He believed he was treated like a sidekick, not an equal. A joke he made summed it up. It's like being in a band with Steven Tyler. You're never going to be the lead. Following a back injury and surgery, Frank never returned to American Pickers. The network moved on. Frank didn't. He insisted. He was ready to come back, but the offer never came. That rejection stung deeper than most people realized. It wasn't just a job. It was his identity. In 2022, Frank suffered a massive stroke. A friend found him unresponsive on the floor of his home. He was rushed to the hospital, where doctors discovered extensive brain damage. He spent weeks in recovery, followed by months in a nursing home. The once independent man now needed round-the-clock care. His finances crumbled. Though he had once been worth millions, medical expenses drained his savings. Courts appointed a guardian to oversee his care and a bank to manage his remaining assets. The man who once spotted treasures no one else could see could no longer manage his own life. Frank's estate, once estimated at over $6 million, was now the subject of court proceedings. He was spending upwards of $30,000 a month on medical expenses, and his only income came from modest investments. Friends stepped in to help, but even they couldn't stop the rapid decline. Frank's home, once filled with laughter and the rev of restored engines, grew quiet. It became a place of waiting for visits, for updates, for a miracle that never came. Behind closed doors, a legal storm brewed. In February 2025, Frank's father, William "Bill" Fritz, filed a lawsuit contesting the validity of a will submitted in 2023. According to Bill, the document was a fake. The will left almost everything, the motorcycles, the memorabilia, the property, to Frank's close friends and caregivers, leaving Bill with nothing. He argued that he was Frank's only surviving family and should inherit everything. Bill's case hinged on a crucial point. In 2022, a judge had declared Frank legally unfit to make personal or financial decisions. How, then, could he have signed a legal will in 2023? The argument sparked a high-profile court battle, with experts, attorneys, and longtime friends taking the stand. Bill claimed he had been cut out of Frank's life unfairly. He mentioned fishing trips in St. Thomas, holidays together, and phone calls that seemed to vanish overnight. But others saw a different picture. A man trying to reclaim a fortune he had long since abandoned. As the legal drama unfolded, the spotlight returned to what Frank had left behind. Collectors, museums, and auction houses buzzed with excitement. His motorcycle collection alone was valued between $2 million and $3 million. Each piece had a story. The 1922 Ace 4, bought during a Pickers episode for $45,000, was now worth nearly $200,000. The 1939 Indian 4, known as the Aristocrat, was another standout, valued at over $115,000. There was even a 1928 Indian Scout with original paint, a unicorn in the collecting world. And then there was the crown jewel, the 1947 Indian Chief prototype. No one knew this bike existed until it was discovered in Frank's garage. Its custom design, rare components, and impeccable condition made it one of the most significant finds in recent memory. Experts speculated its value could exceed $250,000, perhaps more. But the true worth wasn't just in the parts, it was in the provenance. Frank's journals, detailing the acquisition and restoration of each bike, transformed every motorcycle from a machine into a documented piece of history. His collection didn't end with bikes. Tucked in a back corner of the garage sat the infamous Aerosmith tour bus. Frank and Mike had found it in the Massachusetts woods in 2018, paid $25,000, and restored it. When the band saw it again in 2019, emotions ran high. Joe Perry called it a time capsule. It wasn't just a vehicle, it was a symbol of their early years, their dreams, and their rise to fame. The moment had been televised, but now the bus stood quietly, surrounded by dust and silence, a monument to better days. Even more shocking were the Yoda prototypes, 4 in total. They looked like fan-made oddities until a former Lucasfilm artist verified their authenticity. Modeled on early concept designs from 1978, each figure told a different story about the evolution of one of pop culture's most beloved characters. Frank had paid very little for them. Today, each was worth over $6,000. Their discovery sparked renewed interest in Frank's lesser-known love for sci-fi and pop culture memorabilia. But Frank didn't just collect. He preserved. He documented. He respected the items he found. His journals included handwritten pages describing each item's history, restoration process, and the people he met along the way. They were more than records. They were memoirs. He even included personal reflections, moments of joy, of sorrow, of triumph. One journal described the first time he got a rusted engine to start after a decade of silence. Another talked about the loneliness he felt in hotel rooms during filming. These notes gave depth to the items. They weren't just valuable, they were personal. The elephant head was another curiosity. Purchased for nearly $10,000 from a taxidermy collector, it had been part of a bizarre exchange with Jack White of the White Stripes. White, a collector himself, traded antiques and cash to acquire the piece, reportedly due to its connection with his band's album, Elephant. The deal raised eyebrows. especially among animal rights activists, but for Frank it was about preserving something unique. There was also the early 1900s jelly car, once used to advertise desserts across small-town America. Few remained in existence, and Frank's was in exceptional condition. He later donated it to a museum, a testament to his belief that some pieces belonged to the public, not to private collectors. He had a philosophy: if an item could educate or inspire, it deserved a bigger audience. In the months after his death, debates raged over what to do with the collection. Some argued for a private auction. Others wanted a museum exhibit. Frank's friends insisted that whatever happened, it had to honor his legacy. This wasn't just about selling items. It was about preserving the soul of a man who had given everything to the pursuit of forgotten stories. Frank's battle with Crohn's disease was lifelong and punishing. For over 36 years, he endured flare-ups, surgeries, and endless medication. On camera, he was a rock, steady, composed, funny. But off camera, there were nights he couldn't sleep, couldn't eat, could barely move. He rarely complained. He didn't want pity. He wanted understanding. That understanding came too late. His fall from the spotlight was gradual but painful. Fans noticed his absence from the show, but didn't know the full story. The stroke in 2022 marked the beginning of the end. He never fully recovered. One side of his body became immobile, his speech slurred. Friends described visits as emotionally devastating. "He knew," said one friend. "He knew what was happening, and he couldn't stop it." Despite the tragedy, the final chapter wasn't without redemption. In May 2023, after years of silence, Frank and Mike Wolfe reunited. A mutual friend had reached out, reminding them of the bond they once shared. They met over Memorial Day weekend. It wasn't a public spectacle. There were no cameras, just two old friends sharing stories, tears, and forgiveness. When Frank's condition worsened in September 2024, Mike was there. He held Frank's hand, whispered to him, told him he wasn't angry, and that he loved him. As Frank took his final breath, Mike said the words that brought everything full circle. "Go find your mother. Go find her." Frank Fritz died at 8:50 p.m. on September 30th, 2024. He was 60 years old, but what he left behind, the motorcycles, the memorabilia, the journals, was more than a collection. It was a legacy, a reminder that value isn't just about money. Sometimes it's about the memories we preserve, the stories we tell, and the lives we quietly impact along the way. Would Frank want a museum built in his name? Maybe. Or maybe he'd just want people to look a little closer the next time they walk past an old sign, a rusted bike, or a forgotten piece of history. Because for Frank, every object mattered. Every story deserved to be heard. And now, thanks to what he left behind, they finally are.